Today we are making hardtack. If you do not know what that is, I'm going to show you. Usually I make this around Christmas time, and I did get to make some this year, but not as much as I actually wanted to because it's always so busy at Christmas. But this is such a fun candy to make. It's an excellent homemade gift to give. You can really make it any time of the year. It just seems like for some reason Christmas time is when I always make it. So I want to show you what this candy is, how you can make it by yourself. When I was growing up, it was a huge production in our house, and I figured out how to do this pretty much on my own. So I'm going to show you all my tips and tricks, and we're going to make some yummy hardtack. Number one, this is we called it a Silpat mat. It's a silicone mat. You can line cookie sheets with these. I pour my hardtack out on this. If you have one of these, this is going to keep you from having to butter a cookie sheet. This way is so much better. You're going to need measuring cups. Specifically, you're going to need a 1 cup measure, a 2/3 cup measure, and a 3/4 cups measure. Pizza cutter. This is a game changer when it comes to making hardtack, and you'll see how I use it. A candy thermometer. This is my favorite one. I have used many over the years, and I will show you why as we make the hardtack, why this one is the best one for candy making in my opinion. You're going to need a saucepan. You do not need a big saucepan, and I do not recommend doing this in a skillet with low sides. No, a high side saucepan. This one is 2 quarts. It's perfect for this. You're going to need your white sugar, light corn syrup. I'll be giving you all the measurements. You'll need water. You're going to need your flavoring, and these are the LorAnn oil flavorings. I'm making spearmint today. This is normally one of the first flavors I make. I didn't have it when I started making it, so I feel like something has been missing from my Christmas candy. So I'm making spearmint today. Food coloring, just any liquid food coloring. As long as you have the basic colors, you can make any color you want. You're going to need a container with a tablespoon or so of powdered sugar in it. You'll see what we do with this at the end. Some sort of colander, again, you'll see what we do with this at the end. And a container for all your hardtack. This was much fuller, but we gave a lot away. So this is what I'll be putting it into when I'm all done. It has a nice lid on the top, keeps everything sealed. Okay, so we will start by measuring all the ingredients out, and I'm just gonna put them in the saucepan. Now, I'm working on what angles are best in my kitchen, so you guys can tell me what you think, but lighting and things like that's a little bit weird to deal with. So my recipe calls for 2 cups of the sugar. So that's what I'm going to put in the saucepan first. And I think this is a standard recipe. I think it's maybe even on the LorAnn Oils website, but I'm just measuring these 2 cups. So 2 cups of sugar, then 3/4 cups of water. I like to put that in before I add the corn syrup. So, and then 2/3 cups of the corn syrup. And you'll want a spatula to make sure you can scrape it all out of the measure. So I'm just putting the 2/3 cup. And you know, the corn syrup, I use the Aldi brand a lot too. You get a nice big bottle of it. It's a little less expensive than the Cairo brand. It works just as well. Just make sure you get all of that into the pot. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like. So I'm going to change the camera so you can see it on the stove. And we're going to talk about the process of cooking this candy. It really is all about this process. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my stove on, and I'm actually going to put it at 5, which would be medium. So whatever stove you're using, medium heat. You will never raise it higher than that. Don't do it. But we can give this a little stir to help it get all mixed together And now what we're going to do is we're going to wait. This whole process is a waiting process. There, you can probably see that a little bit better. So what's going to happen is this is slowly going to get hot. The sugar is going to dissolve. I don't put my thermometer in until it starts to get a little bit more warm. I definitely don't want to pop this in when it starts to get really hot because the thermometer is glass. So you don't want to shock it and have the glass break. What I love about this thermometer is, do you see how the bottom is made? The way that it's designed, there is no way for the bottom of the thermometer to touch the bottom of the pan. That actually could give you a bad reading on your temperature, and you don't want that. You just want to know the temperature of the contents in your saucepan. So when this starts to get a little more melted together and the sugar's starting to dissolve, this has a nice little clip on the back, and I'm just going to clip it onto the side of the pan, and I don't have to worry about it touching the bottom of the pan. Now, when we make hard candy, we are trying to cook it to 300 degrees. 300 degrees is hard crack stage. That's marked right here on this thermometer. It says hard crack. What's going to happen is as this cooks, the water is eventually going to cook out of it. And we're going to watch the thermometer rise. What's funny about this is that there's actually a stall in the cooking of the candy. Once we hit about between 200 to 220, it will come to that temperature fairly quickly, but then when it hits 200, 220, it's going to stall out and you're going to think that you need to turn up the heat. You do not need to do that. You need to wait. Leave the temperature on medium. Let it cook through that stall. During that time, the water is cooking out of the candy. Once you hit about 260 or so, it's going to move very quickly, and that's when you're going to really need to pay attention. So here we are, we have hit 220 degrees. This is the stall that I'm talking about. And if you can see on the thermometer here, do you see this condensation? That's because the water's cooking out. That's why this candy has stalled. It's going to slowly rise for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I haven't ever really timed it. I just know it feels like a long time. So what I have done too while I'm waiting is I have a place to put my candy thermometer when I'm done with it. It's going to have candy on it. I'm going to yank it out. I'm going to set it on a safe place that I don't care if some of this sugar mixture gets on it. And I've also went ahead and taken the step of getting the little plastic wrap off of my flavoring right now because I don't have anything else to do. So I'm just setting myself up for success. I'm going to have to move quickly once this hits the right temperature. Also, let's talk about ventilation. You do need to think about ventilation whenever you are making this candy, especially the mint flavors and the cinnamon and the clove. If you like clove and you're making that, these are oils, most of these flavorings, and they're very potent. And when we add them to this mixture, it's going to steam up. You do not want cinnamon oil in your face. If you need to clear your sinuses out, make clove. It will do the trick. So I use my ventilation hood. This is actually vented to the outside. So if you have one of those in your home, that's awesome. You're going to love that feature when you start adding the oils to the candy. If you just have the one that has the microwave on top, it will still draw it away from you, but it's going to push it back into your house. So be warned, your house is going to smell like all the flavors that you make. Now, when I was a kid, my parents would make this candy and we would all stand around and watch, and we would get to the point where my mom would add in the flavoring and my dad would grab the pan and do it outside. Like we had a door off of the kitchen that went to the outside, and he would take that hot candy and we'd all back out of the way, and he would mix the flavoring in outside because it was just really strong. So even so, our house still smelled like candy for a couple weeks after that, but we all didn't mind. It was Christmas and it smelled like Christmas. So keep that in mind. You definitely want to think about some ventilation when you're adding your flavors at the end. I will be moving quickly at the end, and I hope I can get everything on camera for you. Let's check out our temperature now. Hanging in there at like 228, so long ways to go. Oh, and this is a message particularly for my own children who are going to watch this video. Do not think you have nothing to do. Now is when you go ahead and start washing some of the dishes you dirtied. All your measuring cups and your spatula that has K-row on it, go get those washed and dried while you wait for this to heat up. Your future self will thank you. Okay, she is slowly creeping along. I think it's been about 8 minutes for it to get from 220 to almost 250. Now, do you see where it says hardball on the thermometer? That's 260 degrees. That is where I like to add my food coloring in, that particular temperature. So you'll want to think about if you're making several different flavors or lots of different flavors, how are you going to color your candy so you know what is what? I'm just waiting for this to get to the hardball stage, and I'm going to drop in my green food coloring because I'm making spearmint and I want spearmint to be green. Okay, we are almost to 260 degrees. And once we pass that point from like 260 to 270, the stall's really going to stop and the temperature is going to start increasing a lot more rapidly. So even though I washed dishes a little bit ago, I could have moved over a load of laundry. Once I hit 260, I don't want to leave this unattended. So I'm at 260. I'm going to go ahead and add in my food coloring and just start with like a couple drops, give it a stir until you get it to the color that you want it to be. Now, one reason why I add my coloring at 260 is because it has a chance to incorporate without burning. I have used different food colorings, even like the ones for cake decorating, which are more of a gel. And if this candy is too hot when I add in the coloring, it will actually sort of clump up in places, almost like it burned before it had a chance to mix into the candy. So 260 is the perfect temperature to add it. And you can give it a little stir to get it going, but really after that, all the bubbles are going to mix this together for you. So I'm giving it a little stir. I have not stirred this really at all since I put that thermometer in, just a few times. I'm letting it just kind of do its thing. And now we're going to watch that temperature rise really quickly. It's at about 265 right now. So I'm going to move the camera so you can see the process that goes really fast. Okay, we are at 295. I have my candy ready, my flavoring. I'm just taking the lid off so it's ready for me. I'm gonna set it to the side. And as soon as I see it hit 300, which is just got a couple more degrees to go, I'm gonna turn off the heat. I'm gonna move this pot back and I'm gonna turn on my ventilation. So we'll have to live with the noise. And we are at 300 degrees. This is going off. Take out the thermometer and set it to the side. Now, we're going to stir in the flavoring. And the whole bottle, and you can see the steam coming up. That's all getting sucked outside and not in my face. I'm going to stir this until it sort of stops bubbling. I want to make sure it's well mixed. Now this is just about ready to pour out. So this is the fun part. Now this is very hot, so just keep that in mind. But when I'm sure that everything is mixed in well, I'm going to start pouring it out onto my silicone mat. all those bubbles are going to disappear. And you see I'm going back and forth, because if I just poured it out in the middle, it would run over the edges of the mat. I don't want that. Scrape out my pan. You're not going to get all of this, and because it's very, very hot now and it's going to dry, or cool, I should say, you'll see you start getting little strings of sugar. So just get out as much as you can. Set this hot pan aside. Do not put it in hot or in cold water. Don't do that. Just set it aside. And I went ahead and I turned off my ventilation. So now this is still very, very hot. We don't want it to cool completely. I have heard of people pouring this into powdered sugar in like little rows. I have heard of people cutting it with scissors when it's still slightly hot. That is so hard on your hands and it's a waste of powdered sugar. This is the best way to do this, trust me. So I have a pizza cutter here. Now, I want to make sure my pizza cutter has smooth edges. If yours is bent or has burrs on it, you don't want to use it for this. Make sure it's a good pizza cutter. As these edges start to cool, I'm going to start scoring the candy. So I'll do a test run here. And do you see my cut? If my cut stays, then I can continue cutting. If it's so hot that it sort of bleeds back together, then I know I need to wait a little bit. So what I start doing when I know that it's cool enough is I start scoring around all the edges like this. So I'm just going around. The center is going to be hotter, obviously, than the edges. The edges are going to cool first. So that's why I start around the edges. And I'm going to do this all the way around the candy. So hopefully my arm's not in the way too much here. But you kind of need to move quickly at this point, because if it gets too cool, you won't be able to score it. I can feel as I get to the ends on the outside, it's a little bit harder. And what this is doing is it's giving me perfect bite-sized pieces. And because I waited until it was at the right temperature to score it, it didn't bleed back together. It wasn't too hot. Doesn't that look so cool? So now what do we do next? We want it to cool a little bit. Because we have scored it, this is going to break apart for us really easy into perfect little squares and rectangles. Now is where our powdered sugar is going to come into play. We're going to take the outside edges first, and look at that. It just snaps apart. Once it's at the right temperature, it snaps apart, and you're just going to start dropping it into your container that you've put powdered sugar into. Some of this is still a little bit soft, but generally if you start with the edges first, it will start breaking apart. Now this can still be kind of sharp and pokey, so be careful. This is the part my kids love to do. Look how pretty that looks. Some people call this glass candy. We always called it hardtack. So did any of you guys do this as a kid? Do you have memories of this? Do you do this today? Do you do it differently than I do? What are your favorite flavors? Like definitely every year the first batch is always cinnamon, usually followed by clove and then spearmint. It's just, I didn't have spearmint in the cupboard this year. Normally I have like 20 different flavors on hand. You can find the LorAnn oils either online or you can find them in a lot of drugstores still. If you call around to some of your local, more mom and pop, smaller chain drugstores, you can find them there. And you would be surprised at all the flavors. So you see, I'm just breaking this up. And this isn't too hot for me to touch, but it's warm enough that it's pliable. So once it gets to the right temperature, it will just start to break up. Now you're getting these oils on your hands, so just keep that in mind. You don't want to rub your eyes after doing this before you wash your hands. There you go, beautiful hardtack. Now we're going to put the lid on this. This will be loud, but we're going to give this a shake. Till it's good and mixed. If you skip this step, all your candy is going to stick together. Now, what do I do next? Okay, here's my pan. Just a quick tip, do not put water in the pan until it's cooled down quite a bit. You will warp your pans. I don't know if you know that. You take a hot pan like that and you put cold water in it, and then you wonder why your pans are all wobbly on the stove. It's because you warped them. It's just too harsh of a temperature change too quickly. So I'm going to take this colander, and this is just something I do. This is something my parents didn't do. I dump the candy into the colander. That is to get rid of all of this extra sugar and tiny, tiny shards. They just collect at the bottom of the container of candy. So dump it out and just shake off all that extra sugar. You only need a little bit. It's just very lightly stuck to the candy. It's enough to keep it from sticking together, and that's really the only purpose behind the powdered sugar. So there you go. So many memories in this little bowl of candy. I just think about when I made it as a child with my parents, watching them scurry around the kitchen, making it with my own children as they were growing up, and now sharing it with you. And I know they will watch this video too, and now they can do what mom did, just like mom did it. So I appreciate you guys for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Kids, you can just call me or come over and I'll show you how to do that. But anyway, it's time for a taste test. I'm the lucky one. I'll see you guys again really soon. Bye.